What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's a good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here. And what do you get when you start the season off 0-4, potentially 0-5? It's early draft speculation and it's trade chatter, and we're here to talk about the latter because November 4th ends the trade deadline for the NFL, and this is often time where you're going to see your playoff caliber teams looking to add that last piece or two in order to solidify their playoff push towards a Lombardi trophy. And for the teams in the midst of a rebuild or in the early stages of a rebuild, they're looking to sell all in order to stockpile a war chest to capitalize in the NFL draft. The New York Jets are going to be no different. Aaron Glenn obviously has sold us on the fact that he wants to win and wants to win now. I don't think he's, strayed from that path nonetheless, but the roster, or at least the adjustment to this new coaching staff and the schemes, are probably a little bit overblown, right? In terms of, we thought we had pieces to win with right away, and while we do have some superstars, it's everything after a handful of players, let's say 3, 4, maybe 5 guys. That's the problem with this team, and that's what they're working on, needing to do a complete overhaul on. So it doesn't surprise me, although slightly, just because of how early it is. But Ralph Vacchiano actually dropped some commentary from a anonymous executive in the NFL about what they feel like the New York Jets were going to do. So he mentioned specifically, and the Jets are loaded with too many of ex-general manager Joe Douglas's players. New general manager Darren Mougey and coach Aaron Glenn are going to want to purge that organization and rebuild it with their guys. They look like a mess right now. So I think they'd be open to trading almost anybody. And it's those last 4 to 5 words there that are really the key. A question I've had out there for a while is, Darren Mougey hasn't made a ton of moves to build up his war chest. I think it's a common practice that you see a new general manager look to have as much draft capital as possible in the first 1 to 2 years in order to be able to build on. And does that mean they can always pull off getting an additional first round pick? No, but generally you'd like to have at least a pick in every round, and then of course something within the first 2 days of the draft. And that's not really the case for Darren Mougey, which makes this argument a lot more valid in my opinion. This also isn't a crazy concept for this team. One, we obviously realize that we have a huge depth problem, and that's littered with the fact of how we decided to approach things this offseason when it came to stocking up the roster. You look at the defensive end spot, you look at defensive tackle prior to the trades we pulled off for Briggs and Phillips, you look at spots like linebacker, where now that we're out losing Quincy Williams due to IR, we're seeing the depth, and with the struggling Sherwood, we're seeing the depth be called into question, right? So they tried to do some things. Obviously, either the players weren't ready out of the gate, or we just didn't acquire the right type of personnel. But thinking about what it truly means, if you talk about being willing to trade almost anybody, there's really the 4 or 5 names that I mentioned prior that are off limits, right? And that's either due to contract extensions, draft status, or what they've done up to this point in this career, right? A couple of the names that will come to mind: Justin Fields. This is a guy that's fighting for the right to be able to continue as a starter in the league. Franchise quarterback conversations, all that, disregard, right? If the Jets do end up with a top 3, top 5 pick, the questions around who we may draft a quarterback are going to be never ending. And I don't know if there's anything Justin Fields could do shy of us going on some kind of crazy winning streak here and getting a wild card spot and maybe getting a win in the playoffs with them, right? Outside of that, I think it's 100% golden chance that we end up drafting this regime's quarterback of the future, and then we look to make a quarterback competition battle happen with Justin Fields, who will move into that bridge quarterback role, taking the spot for Tyrod Taylor. When you look at Garrett Wilson, he's going to be a name, right? Recent contract extension, a guy that always has felt like a fringe top 10 wide receiver. And a lot of that really just be due to the fact that he's been handicapped by quarterback play, right? You could also throw in scheme and a number of other things in there, but ultimately, he's a star-studded number one wide receiver for a offense that sorely needs him. Sauce Gardner. Again, recent contract extension. He's a guy, again, on his worst day for all of his faults, lack of takeaways, general lack of physicality to his game. Still going to be considered a top 5, top 10 cornerback, probably on a yearly basis going into his prime. Quinnen Williams. This is one I teeter-tottered on, right? His name did come up in the Micah Parsons trade when the Cowboys reached out. It was pretty much shut down by Darren Mougey, which makes me think that obviously they consider him an elite talent, but he does have no guaranteed money on his contract next year. What's the extension conversation going to look like? And also, how does his brother's contract negotiations potentially impact him? Also, let's not let it fall on deaf ears that there's a level of losing that could alter the thought process for a lot of these players, no matter how homegrown they've been or regardless of the contract stuff that's going on, right? The vibes around Aaron Glenn felt good in the offseason. Now that you're looking at potentially going on a historical 5-win losing streak, I think I saw this would make Aaron Glenn just the third coach with co-titan Adam Gase to let that happen in recent memory. It's something where, Quinnen Williams can look up and say, hey, this is my chance to go to a contender. I still have some good years ahead of me. I tried my best. We couldn't get it done, right? Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson are in a bit of a different position, having him beat by, 5-6 years of youth, somewhere in that ballpark. So wouldn't blame him, but also not a guarantee that we could get him back. So could he be traded if the right offer came? Maybe. You look at, and by the way, a lot of that, in my opinion, would be facilitated by the fact of how much do they believe in Jawan Briggs as a solid depth piece, and then can Harrison Phillips kind of, I guess, somewhat moonlight in that role as just an acceptable piece that can be an impact player on the defensive line? Who knows? But it would leave a gaping hole and one that would cause a lot more problems than helping us out, unless you're talking about getting, multiple high round picks back or something of that nature. And then the rookie class at large. All of those guys should generally be considered safe, at least until they get through their next offseason, and we'll see how things pan out, right? But this is why you want the influx of draft capital, because ideally you're going to have this full offseason now where Darren Mougey has been able to make some moves to the scouting department. He's been able to implement whatever his evaluation process is going to look like. And now they're not missing things like the All-Star Senior Game and the Shrine Bowl and these other various events that could have helped them get a lot more intel to maybe make some different moves in the 2025 draft class. Now, outside of that, that does seem like a lot of names, but realistically, there's not really a lot else to offer, right? You take a look at the quarterback room. Could Tyrod Taylor be moved? Potentially, but you don't want a room of Justin Fields and then Brady Cook, right? You look at the running back room. Breece Hall. Obviously, his name has been at the forefront of trade chatter for a couple of years now. It feels like it ramps up every week as the losses pile up, but also as people feel like his usage just really isn't being utilized properly, for lack of better words, right? Either the type of runs that we're initiating him for now that the offensive line looks improved, or it's just the fact that we don't really have many threats to help him lighten the box and take advantage of certain situations. Feels like a guy that at the moment he touches base on a different team, he's going to go out and start collecting 100-yard games and 25 plus scrimmage yard games on a consistent basis, right? Could definitely see that happening. But again, this feels like a guy that we don't necessarily plan on extending with the hopes that Braylon Allen comes back healthy, and then seeing whatever Isaiah Davis can take advantage of with the Braylon Allen injury also coming up and potentially eating into Breece Hall's snaps. Wide receiver, there's literally nothing behind Garrett Wilson, so you're really relying on Arian Smith to develop, tag up with Garrett Wilson at some point, and then you're probably adding in the draft again. Tight end, not really much that you can do there either. I think they're comfortable with Jeremy Ruckert for the year. Maybe they can get him back on a low contract as a tight end 3, and then Mason Taylor's your guy of the future while you look to add more depth there. Offensive line, same thing. You're not really at the advantageous spot of being able to offer up anybody. But ABT could be in the mold, right? Maybe somebody is willing to buy early on him, assuming that he finds a way to stay healthy. And again, it's like an incentive-heavy contract or something. Who knows, right? I think at the very least, Joe Tippmann's been an acceptable replacement and could have a pretty decent ceiling at the guard position as well. But there's going to be some more maneuvering that needs to be done. So we have to answer some questions, but he would feel like the only trade piece that would potentially make sense. Defensive line, we don't really have anything to offer, right? You look at edge, again, Michael Clemens. You've heard Connor Rogers and plenty of people talk about him as more of a 4th or 5th guy in the rotation who's having to play 2nd or 3rd level snaps, which is not ideal whatsoever. JJ, you'd like to see him consistently on the field at least, but that combination of McDonald and Jermaine Johnson looks really good, but you need to build up behind them. And of course, the offense needs to play with the lead to give those guys the opportunity to really take full advantage of what their skill sets are. And then again, defensive tackle, we don't really have a ton to be excited about. Maybe you look at someone like Leonard Taylor, hope that he's shown enough, and you kind of push him off, again, assuming you feel good about Harrison Phillips and Jawan Briggs. Linebacker, again, maybe Quincy Williams is that guy for you. Contract year, probably not returning since we paid Sherwood. He's going to be over the age of 30. He's going to end up demanding a pretty decent contract out there on the market once again. And again, you can't sweep under the rug whatever contract situations may happen between Quinnen and or Quincy and how that impacts one or the other. And then at cornerback, that's probably your best spot, right? I know it hasn't looked good in the secondary as a whole. I'll throw the safety room into this conversation as well, as you don't really have pieces that anybody's going to want. But you have Quantez Stiggers. You have who's actually rounding out our roster? Sauce, Stevens, MC2, who potentially, I guess, could be a trade piece, but with him trending downward performance-wise, not great. You have Quantez Stiggers and Isaiah Oliver. So those are our 5 guys. I don't think anybody's jumping at the chance to necessarily take any of these guys. Stiggers has done well on special teams, and at least as a developmental piece that someone may want to buy into. Maybe he's our best shot of maybe getting someone outside of Michael Carter if they feel like health and maybe a return to that being something that they can, again, kind of buy low on and reap the rewards of. But it's hard to figure out where Mougey will be able to maneuver and send some of these pieces. Now, could something come out of the blue and shock us all? Of course, it's always happened. You know, look at Blake Cashman. Look at I forgot the Laurent Duvernay-Tardif trade that we talked about before. Daniel Brown, tight end, formerly being part of that. And I know there's got to be another name or two that's kind of on the tip of my mind that I can't necessarily pull out of the sky right now. But we've seen crazier things happen. So do I think it's ideal or going to happen? No. But if we do go 0-5, I think Aaron Glenn being able to at least usher some more of these guys out and being able to build up his chances of getting more selections in the draft would be appealing, even if it means it's going to be a tougher year one for him. But I have another video dropping about some thoughts about the long-term prospects and short-term prospects of Aaron Glenn in terms of how safe he may or may not be, depending on how this season shapes up and how many wins he can actually collect. But let me know what you guys think. Would we be willing to trade anyone at the trade deadline? Should we be willing to trade anyone? And what does that potentially look like, right? I think at best, maybe you can pull off 1-2 trades, and I don't think you're talking about multiple draft selections happening here, but we'll see. Let me know what you guys think, though, and I'll catch you again. Peace.